Plus, he tells us what company he believes is the most ferocious company in America. We're looking ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. The top story of the weekend, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe breaking his silence following his firing by Attorney General Jeff Sessions on Friday night. McCabe claiming his dismissal is part of an attack on the FBI and on the Mueller Russia investigation. Meanwhile, we are also learning that McCabe kept notes on his interactions with the president, similar to the memos kept by former FBI Director James Comey. Joining me right now is House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte of Virginia. Mr. Chairman, good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria. Good to be with you and your viewers.
Your reaction to the firing of Andrew McCabe?
Well, I think the Attorney General did the right thing. It was the appropriate decision, given the reports of his having leaked internal information to the media and then giving false information about that, misleading information to those investigating the matter. These are very serious concerns, and they tie into the overall concern about how the FBI handled investigations into the elections last year. So the steps are appropriate.
Now, there are a lot of pushback posts and tweets this weekend from the left. Let's go through the fireable offenses here and why specifically Andrew McCabe was fired. We know that the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility recommended that McCabe be fired. They cited findings from the Justice Department's Inspector General report, which is going to be made public, we understand, in April. McCabe made unauthorized disclosure to the news media. He ordered the disclosure of information to the Wall Street Journal about an ongoing investigation into the Clinton Foundation. He lacked candor under oath on multiple occasions, was not forthcoming, and in the end violated Justice Department policies. How did he lack candor? Is this suggesting he lied under oath?
Well, again, we won't know until we see the Inspector General's report and hear other information, but lacking candor definitely suggests that he gave false information to those investigating the matter. You have been
investigating the FBI along with the Oversight Committee and Trey Gowdy, investigating the FBI and its handling of the Clinton email scandal. We know that there are 1.2 million pages of texts. How many of those texts, those documents have you seen?
Yeah, there are more than text. There are other documents as well in the 1.2 million, but we've only seen a tiny percentage of that, and that's regrettable because, quite frankly, while the work of the Inspector General is important and we're looking forward to seeing his report, his responsibilities and the Congress's responsibilities in conducting oversight over the nation's most important premier law enforcement organization is also important, and we need to have those documents. The department and the Bureau have been slow, I would say now very slow, in getting them to us. The last time I was on your program, I expressed confidence that we would have those documents forthcoming, and here we are several weeks later, still don't have them, so this is coming to a head.
Congressman, let's be clear. There are 1.2 million documents. You've only seen 3,000 of them. You've been stonewalled for 5 months.
We have seen some documents. We've seen more than we saw from the Obama administration Justice Department, but we need more documents, and we need them now, and we need them unredacted, by the way, Maria. These latest revelations about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page talking about a federal judge, a Judge Contreras, who was appointed to serve on the FISA court, and they're talking back and forth about how good that is and how Peter Strzok needs to be catching up with him and talking to him. That was made available to us earlier in a redacted form, and it was only just recently that we had the opportunity to see that text unredacted. That clearly does not draw any conclusion about what that judge and Peter Strzok may have done or not done, but it's clearly material to what was going on in the FBI regarding how they were treating this court.
So again, let's be clear here. Normally when there are redactions, they redact things because they are a point of national security. But in fact, what was redacted, because then you saw the unredacted material, was text about going to a cocktail party with this FISA judge, Judge Contreras.
That's correct, and that's information, that's material to the investigation. Not drawing any conclusions about it, but we should know it. That's correct.
Let me ask you, because we're all waiting on the Michael Horowitz IG report, sir, but we know that Michael Horowitz does not have subpoena power. You do have subpoena power. If you keep getting stonewalled and you don't get these documents, are you going to subpoena these documents?
Well, the answer is yes, and as I say, the whole matter is coming to a head. We've had communications with the Department of Justice about this, and they know that not just myself and Chairman Gowdy, but many other members of the House are very concerned about the slow nature of those documents being produced. And as I say, action's going to have to take a new level here very soon.
So again, if you don't get the documents that you have been asking for several months, more than 5 months, you will subpoena those documents from the FBI.
We will.
Okay. Let me ask you what went on here, sir, because people are wondering why there is such a pushback from the left. In fact, John Brennan, former head of the CIA himself, came out this weekend and pushed back aggressively the firing of Andrew McCabe. We have his tweet here, and here's what he says to the president. When the full extent of your venality, moral turpitude, and political corruption becomes known, you will take your rightful place as disgraced demagogue in the dustbin of history. You may scapegoat Andy McCabe, but you will not destroy America. America will triumph from under you. I'm wondering about Brennan. Wasn't he working for a time at the CIA under President Obama when some of this took place? Is he involved?
Well, we don't know that, but his statement is clearly overwrought. The fact of the matter is both Republicans and Democrats should be concerned about the actions taking place in the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 2016 and in 2017. If I were a Democrat, I would want to know why it is that Andrew McCabe was leaking to the Wall Street Journal about the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton investigation, not about Donald Trump. If I were a Democrat, I'd want to know why James Comey, 10 days before the election, announced that he was reopening that investigation. He announced it publicly. It may have had an impact on the election, and therefore, while Republicans are very concerned about his original decision and how that came about not to indict former Secretary of State Clinton, it should be equally concerning to Democrats that the manner was conducted the way it was conducted. So there is a serious problem with several people who were, and I'm thankful to say are no longer, but were at the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It needs to be investigated. It needs to be investigated by an outside, independent special counsel, and that's why Chairman Gowdy and I conveyed to Attorney General Sessions just last week our belief that it's very important that the Attorney General appoint a special counsel to begin by looking into the manner in which FISA warrants were obtained by the FBI.
Well, you make a really important point, Congressman, because the Inspector General cannot subpoena or speak to or interview anyone who's no longer at the FBI. So that limits what he can actually do, which is why you've sent a letter to the Attorney General last week asking him to appoint a second special counsel. Have you heard back from Jeff Sessions yet on this?
We have not heard back directly, but we were pleased to see that he stated publicly in response to questions that he was taking the request seriously. And I'm also pleased that a number of other individuals, including 4 prominent senators led by Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley, later also joined us in calling for the appointment of a special counsel. I've been told by many people, including some who were skeptical about the earlier call that I and others in the House made for the appointment of special counsel, now agree that because that counsel has powers separate and apart from the department and the Bureau, right, and because they can look into matters that go beyond the department. There are allegations about things going on in the State Department as well. So this is an important thing that needs to be looked at in a serious manner by someone with independence and subpoena power and prosecutorial power.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask you about what Andrew McCabe said after he was fired this this weekend. And he said that he had, quote, authority to share information with the press with the knowledge of the director. That statement is entirely inconsistent with Comey's May 2017 congressional testimony, which obviously was under oath, when he was asked, have you ever authorized anyone to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump or Clinton investigations? He said, no, never. Does that create perjury for Jim Comey?
Well, I don't want to reach that conclusion because I'm not sure which of them is telling the truth. However, it creates a clear conflict in Mr. McCabe's statement and Mr. Comey's sworn testimony, and that, again, is one more reason why an independent counsel needs to look into this matter. And I say this because, as we said at the outset, the FBI is the premier law enforcement organization of the world, and tens of thousands of great men and women every day keep us safe. They fight crime, they prevent terrorist attacks, and they have been besmirched by this scandal at high levels in the FBI. It needs to be investigated from the outside so that the facts can be made known, corrections made. Obviously, the personnel are now being removed, and that is a very important step, and I applaud Attorney General Sessions for removing Mr. McCabe. However, we need to make sure this does not happen in the future, and therefore the Congress, which has the legislative power and the oversight responsibility, needs to have all of the facts.
Yeah. How long are you expecting this to go on? Let's say there is a second special counsel come in. What would be your timing on that?
I couldn't control that, and that is definitely a downside to investigations, is they take some time. But you do want to get all the facts, and you do want to conduct it in a professional and impartial manner. But we need to get about doing it. It should have been started months ago, right? If not before that.
And by the way, Mr. Chairman, do we know how high up the ladder this goes? I mean, we know that Loretta Lynch, then the Attorney General, told Jim Comey, refer to the Clinton email investigation as a matter, not as a criminal investigation. And that's exactly what he did. He called it a matter, not a criminal investigation. Did President Obama direct Loretta Lynch to do that? Do we know how high up this goes?
We do not know whether that is indeed the case or not, but there certainly is a question about who exactly Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, was sending classified emails in an unprotected manner. And as that is further investigated, it may be revealed that other people were aware of this situation that we do not have confirmation about at this point in time.
I think it's really extraordinary that Andrew McCabe took all these notes when he met with President Trump, but there are no notes about Hillary Clinton. I don't even think that the interview that the FBI did was on the record. Mr. Chairman, I hope you'll come back soon. Thanks for joining us.
I will. Maria, just let me say that last point you just made about bias is an absolutely critical issue. The difference between how these two investigations were conducted is shocking.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll keep on it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. More now on McCabe firing at the FBI. Fox News contributor and former House Speaker Newt Gingrich joins me now to weigh in. He is also the author of the #1 New York Times best-selling book, Understanding Trump. Mr. Speaker, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's great to be with you. And let me just say, I think that you and Chairman Goodlatte just had an extraordinary interview that not only made news, but really helped people understand how compelling it is to get to the heart of the corruption that was going on in the Justice Department. I thought it was a very, very important interview.
Thank you so much, Newt. And, you know, it is extraordinary when you look at the FBI. And I said this earlier on Fox and Friends, when you see a situation happen and the guys with the FBI jackets walk in, you feel better. You feel like there's such trust in the FBI. And unfortunately, all of those thousands of people have been besmirched by a group at the top that went rogue, Andrew McCabe included.
Well, I think that's why it's very, very important to get to the heart of this and to find out what went wrong. We rely as a country on the rule of law. And you look at someplace like Venezuela or Zimbabwe or Cuba, you understand how really important having faith in the rule of law is to a free society. And the FBI has historically done an outstanding job and there are thousands of hardworking agents all over the world doing the best they can. But we have, as a country, an obligation to root out the cancer that was clearly at the heart of the Justice Department, as you pointed out in your interview, may well have gone above the FBI to the Attorney General and beyond her. So I think this story is going to continue to unfold. My experience back in the Watergate years when I was first running for Congress was that these things kind of unravel, and each week you learn something new, and that leads you to something new, and that leads you to something new. And I think the report on McCabe is just one more piece of the unraveling. And frankly, the Peter Strzok stuff may be as important as the McCabe stuff, because at least based on the initial copies we're getting of the text messages, he clearly had some kind of relationship with the judge who they went to for the FISA warrant to go after General Flynn. And I think that puts in doubt the entire process of Flynn's case and begins to set up an argument for giving Flynn a pardon and erasing that entire case.
Well, the other thing is the fact that they redacted that. So they have a conversation on text about the fact that Judge Contreras is going to a cocktail and go meet him at the cocktail party, and that was what was redacted. That's not of national security. That's just you don't want anybody to know that Peter Strzok went to a cocktail party with the FISA judge.
Now, you know, part of this, and I'm beginning to think about maybe next year as all of this begins to unfold, actually trying to put together just a chronology, a history of it, because it's so complicated. But part of what you're seeing happen here is the deep state protecting itself by redacting things that are political. They're not national security. And your point is exactly right. I'm with you. When you got Chairman Goodlatte to admit that out of 1.2 million documents, he's only gotten 3,000. It makes you wonder how much more we're going to learn when we see the rest of those documents.
Right. Well, we're going to talk more this morning about the IG report, which we are expecting in April, which has all of the facts in it. Newt, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for weighing in this morning.
Thank you.
Newt Gingrich there. The White House gearing up for a high-profile visit. Meanwhile, next week, from the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. We'll talk about that and then get back to the Andrew McCabe firing with Jim Kallstrom from the FBI next. Welcome back. President Trump scheduled to host Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at the White House this upcoming week. The two leaders had their first face-to-face encounter in Riyadh last May. Joining me right now is the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Robert Jordan. He's the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia under President George W. Bush. Ambassador, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Maria. Good to be with you.
What are you expecting from this meeting next week?
Well, this is a very big deal. Crown Prince Mohammed is, I think, seeking American support to continue pressure on Iran. He's no big fan of the Iran nuclear deal, and so we may see some discussion about that. I think the president and our administration will want to talk with the Saudis about what's going on in the war in Yemen. It's a tremendous humanitarian catastrophe, and I'm sure there is building pressure, particularly within the Senate, to curtail that conflict. But I think fighting Iran on various fronts throughout the Middle East is going to be a very important part of it. And also this blockade of Qatar, which has created a real rift in the Gulf Cooperation Council. We very much need these Gulf monarchies to be on the same page, and so I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. And then, of course, it's really important that Crown Prince Mohammed is sort of taking off on a whistle-stop tour throughout the United States. He's going to San Francisco, to L.A. to meet with movie executives, to talk with Google and Apple. This is completely unheard of, and I think it signals a completely new approach by the Saudis to engaging with the West and certainly with America.
It sure does. And when I was in Riyadh in October of last year, I had the chance to interview His Royal Highness, and he said, look, we want to live like normal people. We want to live the way we lived before the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And that is the same place, I guess, that the president is on. You mentioned two things that the president disagreed with Rex Tillerson about: the Iran deal and the situation in Qatar.
Exactly. And so I think this is going to be a chance for them to check signals, to be sure they are on the same page, and also to see where it goes from here, because even though the Saudis have continued this blockade of Qatar, it's not really serving anyone's interest and has actually driven Qatar into the arms of Iran and Turkey. So there are some major strategic issues they've got to sort out here.
Are you expecting the president to renew the deal, the Iran deal, when it comes up next?
My guess is he will not, and I think Secretary-designate Pompeo will support that. The Europeans are frantically trying to figure out a way to cobble together some fig leaf that will look like a renegotiation of the deal, but none of it has much to do with anything other than additional sanctions. So I'm not optimistic that we're going to see a breakthrough, and it sounds to me as if the president will probably not certify it.
Meanwhile, there is a growing thought that there is a connection between Tehran and North Korea. Do you see a connection?
Yeah. I haven't seen evidence of it yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were communications back and forth. Certainly, there's also been rumors the North Koreans had communications with Pakistan some years ago. So all of this is a very dark area that we don't have much visibility on.
And when you say, conversations, obviously we're talking about the availability of nuclear weaponry.
Certainly technology, if not weaponry itself. And so I think that's something that we very much want to closely follow. Our intelligence organizations need to work seamlessly together to try to sort this out and find out what we can.
In terms of this Saudi Aramco deal that is now delayed until next year, do you expect that this deal will not come to the United States because of the opportunity for the victims and the families of 9/11 to be able to sue the Saudi government? Because my theory is it's not going to come to America at all because of this recent legislation that allows the victims to sue the Saudi government.
I think that legislation is an impediment. There has been some talk within the Senate of a bill that would give the president discretionary power to waive the ability to bring those suits. And if that's the case, then we may see a resurgence of that opportunity. But right now, I do think a listing in America is going to be a problem in light of that legislation.
All right, we will leave it there. Ambassador, it's good to see you. I know I'll see you next week on the Fox Business Network as we assess the Crown Prince's meeting. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Maria.
Robert Jordan joining us. Back to our top story. Andrew McCabe is out at the FBI. Breaking news from House Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte this morning right here on this program. He just told me he will subpoena the missing documents he's asked for from the FBI. He says the FBI has been stonewalling Congress. Former Assistant FBI Director James Kallstrom is joining me next live as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures this morning. We want to get right back to our top story, the McCabe firing at the FBI. James Kallstrom is the former assistant director of the FBI, and he joins me right now. And Jimmy, it's good to see you.
Nice to be here.
You had 27 years at the FBI. I know how important and the pride that you have for the FBI. How do you think the FBI is taking it this morning that the number 2 guy, Andrew McCabe, has been fired?
I think there's a big sigh of relief and a good feeling about the fact that an FBI element, an organization in the FBI, recommended that he be fired.
Right, the Office of Professional
As opposed to them being mute and having someone else make that recommendation. So I think they're very happy about that. I mean, I don't know for a fact, but I'm guessing that that's the case. And they're just gnawing at the bit to actually get involved in a real investigation, not a phony investigation like Jim Comey conducted, a fraudulent investigation.
I don't understand what was driving them, Jim. Let's put this in context for a moment. You've got 10 people at the top of the FBI and the Department of Justice that have been either fired or reassigned. Obviously, this is no coincidence. Do you think somebody was directing them, or do you think they just came to the conclusion on their own, this leadership at the FBI and the Department of Justice, that they wanted to change the outcome of the election? They wanted to protect Hillary Clinton.
I think we have ample facts revealed to us during this last year and a half that high-ranking people throughout the government, not just the FBI, high-ranking people had a plot to not have Hillary Clinton, indicted, so that she could remain the flawed candidate that she was, which in my view was stupidity. And they also had and even this Strzok guy talked about this. They had a backup plan to basically frame Donald Trump. And that's what's been going on. This whole thing, in my view, is just total phony. I mean, how would you feel, someone out there in America land, if somebody was just had a phony scheme about you and went on for months and months and months? Yeah, and that's what's going on today.
Well, the special counsel is in place, and now you just heard Bob Goodlatte, chairman of Judiciary, wanting a second special counsel. I want to get your take on how high this goes up, because I'm wondering if Andrew McCabe just perjurized Jim Comey and what the culpability is of Jim Comey. So Andrew McCabe, in terms of pushing back on this firing, said, I was authorized to share information with the press, and that was known among many, including the director. Okay? But here's what the director, Jim Comey, said back in May of last year when asked this specific question. Here is Jim Comey under oath. Listen to this.
Director Comey, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
Never.
Question 2 on relatively related. Have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation?
No.
Never and no. And yet Andrew McCabe on Saturday morning had a lengthy statement saying, I was authorized to share this information and the director knew about it. Your thoughts?
Well, I read that statement, and obviously, he's puffing up his few feathers that he has left. I think virtually nothing that he said was truthful from my understanding of his role in the FBI, what kind of an investigator he was, what kind of a supervisor. He was lacking in so many ways. That's my understanding. And, statements like that, which were penned by CNN or somebody else, they're going to just add more trouble to him.
How independent, do you think, was Andrew McCabe versus Jim Comey? I mean, could he have done all of this without Jim Comey knowing?
I've wondered that myself. How much McCabe was doing that Jim Comey knew about or didn't know about. To me, that's a little bit of a question.
Why? What do you mean?
Well, I just don't know. I mean, the stupidity of some of these things was so rampant that it almost makes me question. Although Jim Comey is not a stupid individual, I think he's naive. He's got an ego the size of the Empire State Building, and he has a lot of other faults that got him in this trouble. But, I could be wrong. They could have been totally in lockstep. But there's no question that he and McCabe and others in the FBI and the Justice Department, and we're going to find out the State Department, and the National Security Advisor to the President, and the Deputy National Security Advisor, and John Brennan. Did you see John Brennan's remarks?
We ran the tweet at the top of the show. Yeah. There was real animus in that tweet against President Trump.
The animus and the malice against Trump.
There it is, right on the screen,
It's a prima facie, really, exposure of how he felt about Trump pre the election.
But he was...
And how he was my sources tell me that he was leaking almost weekly and daily, and he was taking that bunch of phony crap, supposedly from Russia, and peddling that through the Congress, all his buddies in the media. He was one of the active people, and I've known him a long time.
So you think he's involved?
Oh, I think he's involved, absolutely. And I think it goes right to the top, quite frankly, Maria.
You mean President Obama?
I think it goes right to the top, and it involves that whole strategy. They were going to win. Nobody would ever know any of this stuff. And they just unleashed the intelligence community. Look at the unmasking. So we haven't even heard anything about that yet, right?
Well, Susan
Look at the way they violated the rights of all those American citizens, right? And General Flynn, I hope General Flynn sues a lot of people, because he was handled so bad.
Well, people have gone to jail for lying to the FBI. That is a felony.
He didn't lie to the FBI.
No, I know.
Yeah, and they didn't even interview him about a crime. I mean, he was in his legal, authorized mode when all that happened.
But it was a felony to leak his conversation with the ambassador to Russia to the press.
Well,
that was a felony.
His unmasking will probably
we
find
know
out.
that from Jeff Sessions.
There's no
told us that on this program.
Yeah, there's no question. They're the people that have committed felonies, not the general, and they've ruined that guy. And because they threatened his son, they bankrupted this guy that gave his life to this country, and just the whole dealings. Look how they didn't deal with the IRS. There's so many things that they've done badly.
Well, it now feels like it's opening up and things are coming out. We will see. How close do you think Jim Comey was with Loretta Lynch? I mean, Loretta Lynch directed Comey to call it a matter, not a criminal investigation. It's exactly what he did. You can go through so many of the misdeeds. It's actually extraordinary.
Well, it is. I mean, I think he was in lockstep, and as I've said in past, there was musical chairs going on, and Loretta Lynch was the leader of the band. But this whole business is special counsel. Now, here's another thing. If you've got a moment, I would wish we didn't have to have a special counsel, but we've got the Attorney General who is a good guy, but I mean, he just hasn't.
Well, he recused himself from everything else.
Yeah, I mean, and are we going to depend on the Deputy Attorney General to pick another special counsel? When he picked Bob Mueller, when he appointed a special counsel, in violation of the enabling statute, the special counsel statute, it says you must have and set out the predicate crimes that you want investigated. And you must make the point that these are crimes that the Justice Department cannot investigate because they're conflicted. Well, he did none of that. He put the guy that's conflicted like the Jersey Turnpike from end to end.
Which is why it's really important that Bob Goodlatte just told us he's going to subpoena for the other documents, because Michael Horowitz and the Inspector General does not have subpoena power. And it's important that there's a big voice now pushing for a second special counsel, an independent counsel.
And how does the Deputy Attorney General remain the Deputy Attorney General? My humble view, when he signed the last continuation of a FISA order that was replete with lies.
All right, we will leave it there. Jim Kallstrom, it's great to see you.
Nice to be here.
Thank you so much for your insights. We so appreciate it. James Kallstrom. Coming up, my exclusive interview with billionaire technology investor and venture capitalist Peter Thiel. Why he supported President Trump in the last election, why he thinks he will win again in 2020, as we look ahead right now on Sunday Morning Futures. Back in a moment. Welcome back. Renowned billionaire venture capitalist Peter Thiel sitting down with me at the Economic Club of New York this week. I spoke with him about his support for President Trump and the company that he says is the most ferocious in America.
So I've often said that our greatest political problem is the problem of political correctness, and I think there are any of a number of issues where it is good to rethink things. The very big tax reform that was pushed through at the end of last year, I think, is a very good thing, and it reflects that we're living in a very different world where we have to ask very hard questions about how do you get American companies to compete globally. The last big tax reform was in 1986. Before that, where you sort of had you sort of simplified and had sort of uniform taxes, and that made sense in a non-globalized world, which was still much less globalized in 1986. And then by 2017, our tax code was set up in such a way that American businesses were seriously disadvantaged, and this was an incredibly healthy reset. And so I think there are any of a number of topics where it's very good to be asking these questions. And then it's been obviously there are all sorts of things that are somewhat disappointing, and at the same time I don't know how much one can expect. So that's. I think I still think it's better than the alternatives by far.
Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton.
Yes, or Bernie Sanders.
Or Bernie Sanders. It does seem like every industry is using AI, and if you're not using AI, you will be at a disadvantage. So there are these sophisticated things like AI, and then there are things that are really basic, like online shopping and really good delivery and getting something delivered in 2 hours like Amazon is doing. And Amazon is trying to take over Can anybody beat Amazon?
I do think Amazon is the most ferocious company in the U.S. At this point. And if you were it is probably the company that you don't want to be competing against. I think there's always this very big difference between companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, where the core businesses are quite high margin, and the internal conversation is always, well, we can expand into this other business, but we're only going to expand into other businesses that are equally high margin. And so you end up, these companies end up being not that aggressive on the expansion side. They talk about it a lot, they think about a lot of things, but then most of the time, the calculus always is, does our margin go down if we do this, and if we do it, maybe we shouldn't. I'm not sure by the way, I'm not sure that's the right way to think about it. Maybe the right way to think about it is, you're earning 1.5% on your money in the bank account, and can you do better than that by investing in other things?
More on my interview on foxbusiness.com with Peter Thiel. Plus, after a short break, more on the fallout over the firing of FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Our panel is on next to discuss as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures right here. Back in a moment. Now our political panel weighs in. Ed Rollins is the former campaign manager for the Reagan-Bush ticket in 1984, and former New York Senator Al D'Amato with us. Both are Fox News contributors. Gentlemen, good to see you both.
Thank you.
An extraordinary week, Ed Rollins.
When historians look back on this week of this administration, this will be one of the great weeks, both in a negative way and a positive way. You had obviously changes in the administration, Tillerson gone, Cohen gone, new team coming in, losing a very critical seat in Pennsylvania. And I think what's going to happen at this point in time, having run the Congressional Committee many years ago, these members of Congress are going to be panicked, and they're going to basically not always be supportive of the president at a time that he really needs support.
Well, the Democrats have to have a message going into the midterm. You're saying the Republicans are going to rethink.
Well, and what I would argue very strenuously is the message for Republicans is not Nancy Pelosi ends up being Speaker. That doesn't work. What it is one-on-one. If I'm running against Al D'Amato, it's why I'm better for your district than Al D'Amato is. And elect me, I'll go to Washington and help Donald Trump get his agenda through. Right. That's the message, not Nancy Pelosi.
But Senator, you've got two storylines on the Republican side going into the midterms. On the one hand, the economy is doing better. By the way, the Federal Reserve is probably going to raise interest rates next week in their two-day meeting. We are expecting the Fed to raise rates on Wednesday, by the way, because the economy is doing better. And then the second storyline is this potential massive abuse of power at the highest halls of government, the FBI and the DOJ.
It's not getting through. That message has not gotten through. Jim Kallstrom did an incredible job. But how many people follow that? In other words, you have either McCabe lied or the former Comey lied, one or the other. Did Comey authorize the release of information? He says no.
He said never, under oath.
So did he lie? Should Congress have a hearing? Should they determine? Should there be an investigation? There certainly should be. The corruption that took place in the Justice Department is undeniable. It really is. But getting back to the election, my friend Ed Rollins has hit the nail on the head. Talk about the economy and what we've moved forward, and make sure you have candidates who can stand up to it. Our candidate in Pennsylvania, he didn't carry a message. He really did.
Well, the critical thing here is, what does the president do now? And the president obviously is very frustrated by what's going on with Mueller and what have you. And I would not be shocked if in the next 2-3 weeks he fires him. And if he does that, then obviously you've got all kinds of consequences.
That would be huge for the left.
But
they would say that's obstruction.
Don't underestimate that. And I think that I don't think he's got the best legal advice. I think they're in a very precarious situation here, and it's all about here. And what occurred is that Justice Department for the 8 years of Obama was very slanted towards Hillary's reelection. Once that didn't occur, then obviously they did everything else to tip the balance, at least the hierarchy, tip the balance against Trump and making Trump successful.
I got to tell you one other thing, and again, I agree with it. I'd get rid of the Deputy Attorney General.
Rod Rosenstein.
Absolutely. Take a look at the appointments that he is responsible for, Mueller and his team. And Mueller, let me tell you, is just after anything he can get.
Well, we'll see about that. By the way, I am being told that right now Eric Holder and President Obama are in a project to do all this redistricting. they are doing redistricting in Pennsylvania. Isn't that right?
Well, but they don't control what occurs there. What controls the state legislature.
Can they do a redistricting that captures more Democrats?
They already have.
Yeah.
They have a plan in there that'll give them 4 more seats. The reality is redistricting doesn't come until after the census, but right now it's 4 seats have been going to change hands in Pennsylvania.
All right, we're going to leave it there. It's a pleasure to see you both. Thank you so much, Ed Rollins, Senator D'Amato. We'll see you soon. That'll do it for us here on Sunday Morning Futures. Thanks for joining me this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Join me tomorrow morning, first thing, Mornings with Maria on the Fox Business Network, 6 to 9. I'll see you then.